Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, now we know why President Trump wanted this Prime Minister to win so much, so he would be against a weak leader whose tax and anti-development policies are driving billions of dollars in jobs to the United States. Yesterday, the Prime Minister promised President Trump $1 trillion of investment in the coming years if we get the deal we want. That is investment that will leave Canada, driving mines and paper mills and factories out of Canada, leaving families without work. Why didn't the Prime Minister negotiate an end to the softwood lumber tariffs instead of offering this gift? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Things aren't getting off to an auspicious start today. Okay, the Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, this is another moment to give a little economic lesson to the Leader of the Opposition. The Canadian and American economies are closely aligned, and I gave such a lesson to the President of the U.S. yesterday. I said that what is at risk is Canadian investment into the United States if we do not get a real detail. We will get a deal, however, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he could certainly give lessons on driving investment out of Canada and into the United States, because he has already managed to drive $54 billion worth of investment into the United States. This killed 86,000 jobs. Households are suffering from this. People are sitting around the dinner table wondering how they are going to pay their bills. And since this Prime Minister took power, American softwood lumber tariffs have doubled. Here's the question. After giving the Americans a $54 billion gift, has he negotiated an end to the softwood lumber tariffs? Yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the current situation is as follows. We have the best agreement with the Americans in the world. We are still negotiating further gains in major sectors, including softwood lumber, and we will only accept the best deal on softwood lumber.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, we now know why the U.S. President wanted this Prime Minister in power so badly, a weak leader whose high taxes and anti-development laws are sending billions of dollars and thousands of jobs out of this country. 86,000 jobs lost. And yesterday, the Prime Minister promised the President that he would increase Canadian investment in the U.S. by $1 trillion if he gets the agreement that he expects to get. Mr. Speaker, in exchange for $1 trillion of job losses in Canada, will he at least get an end to the U.S. auto tariffs that are killing jobs for our workers in Ontario?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have the best deal in the world with the Americans. First point. Second point, the President of the United States and myself had a meeting of minds yesterday with respect to the future of the steel sector, the aluminum sector, the energy sector in cooperation, which is why our teams are negotiating the terms of those deals. And we are working, as the President himself said in the Oval Office, on the modalities of an auto agreement.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he just confirmed he's selling out our auto workers. And let me tell him what it means when investment leaves this country, because he was forced a record amount out in his 7 months in power. The 700 workers at the GM plant who lost their jobs in Oshawa, they can tell him about investment that is left. They're sitting around the dinner table wondering how they're going to pay their bills while GM announces $4 billion of new investment south of the border. So while the Prime Minister promises yet another $1 trillion gift to President Trump, why doesn't he look them at those workers in the eye and explain to them why he betrayed them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what this government is doing for the auto sector is an unprecedented investment in the Canadian auto sector. We look the Canadian auto workers in the eye. We have $5 billion in the Strategic Response Fund. We have $10 billion for liquidity management. We have worker retraining. We are striking deals with countries around the world. We have the best deal already with the Americans, and it will be even better.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll go soft on him today because I know he's still recovering from surgery to have his elbows removed. Remember that promise, Mr. Speaker? Dancing around with his elbows in the air. We haven't seen those elbows since the election, after which $54 billion of investment gone to the United States. 86,000 jobs gone. American tariffs on Canada doubled. And as to the best deal in the world, why is it then, if we have the best deal, that Canada has the fastest shrinking economy in the G7 and 86,000 people are without a job?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Okay. All right. Mr. Speaker, there are three things that are true. First is, I realized long before the Leader of the Opposition, long before the last election, you remember the last election? Long before the last election, that our relationship with the United States would never again be what it was. Secondly, thing that is true is we have the best deal with the Americans. And the third thing that's true is we will get an even better deal because we...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians do remember the last election where that Prime Minister promised to put elbows up. It was not a promise, it was the promise that he ran on. Now those elbows have come down, the American tariffs have doubled, we have by far the weakest economy in the G7, 86,000 people have lost their jobs, and the Prime Minister went pathetically to the White House to offer a $1 trillion gift, bowing before the President in weakness. $1 trillion, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the last election, where in his platform did he promise to give $1 trillion of our investment dollars to the Americans?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to inform the Leader of the Opposition that there is a thing called the private sector. The private sector makes decisions about investment. The private sector, with the best deal in the world, will invest in this country and we will build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Beloeil-Chambly. This will be a long one. It's going to be a long day. The Honourable Member for Beloeil-Chambly. Wow. The Prime Minister seems to have received some mockery. I guess the bar is very low. All he had to do was not fall on his face in front of the U.S. president in the entire world. So I guess he did that. He said that he was a strong leader. That's great. But the Prime Minister ought to gain more and talk less. Is the Prime Minister truly content with a few nice words from the U.S. President instead of a trade agreement? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am happy that the U.S. President and I had a meeting of the minds about a deal for the steel, aluminum, and energy sectors. That is why our teams are working on just such a deal as we speak. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. But that's not what we heard about during the campaign. It was supposed to be better than that. The truth is the Prime Minister came back empty-handed with nothing at all. Zero. Zilch. Yet there are new tariffs on trucks and increased tariffs on softwood lumber. The great negotiator is again coming back into the country, the tail between his legs. When will he stun us? When will he impress us? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, on July 31st, the President of the United States himself signed the best deal in the world between the U.S. and Canada. It keeps 85% of our trade free of tariffs, but we are working harder to get a deal for the steel, aluminum, and softwood lumber sectors. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. His best deal in the world is not really working for the forestry sector nor for the aluminum sector. More pretty words. All he cares about is compliments. Jean de La Fontaine wrote about the fable of the fox and the crow. Skewering the Prime Minister's view of flattery. Does the Prime Minister really believe that Quebecers will content themselves with the words from the wicked fox? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, our team, including the Minister of International Trade, are negotiating on behalf of the aluminum sector. This is not just words. There are numbers here, too, and we will get a deal.
Thornhill.
Speaker, the Prime Minister assured Canadians that he would secure a victory, and there is none. The tariffs that he said he would get rid of have actually doubled, and now he's promising to ship $1 trillion of investment to the U.S. with nothing in return. That's not a strategy. It's a clearance sale on Canadian jobs. Paper mills from BC closing while Washington State cuts the ribbon. Factories in Ontario going dark while Michigan lights up. Why did the Prime Minister trade away Canadian paychecks for an applause line in Washington?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
On the contrary, the Prime Minister is focused on protecting jobs and businesses, first stabilizing supply chains through initiatives like our Strategic Response Fund, Mr. Speaker, including on steel, aluminum, manufacturing, auto, and agriculture, continuing to build supply chains while maintaining a strong domestic economy, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, Mr. Speaker, while negotiating a strong bilateral relationship and diversifying our supply chains. We will build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
With that kind of answer, if you measure your wealth by a stock index, that's your guy. But if it comes from a paycheck, you are his sacrifice. Canadians trusted the Prime Minister to fight for their jobs and to fight for their paychecks. And months after he vowed to get a deal, there still is none. There's 86,000 less Canadians working. He doubled the deficit at home, $54 billion of investment that fled south with the promise to make it $1 trillion. In what world is a $1 trillion gift to Donald Trump considered a win?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, businesses from all over the world are are choosing Canada. That is why, once again, we are ranked as one of the best countries in the G20 for doing business. We are deepening our partnerships in Europe, in the Indo-Pacific, and in Africa to create opportunities here at home. And that's why we've just signed a historic deal with Indonesia to create jobs, to diversify supply chains. Mr. Speaker, these are more than just agreements. They are the resilience of Canada's economic future, Mr. Speaker. We will build Canada strong.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Well, it's a good thing you don't need elbows to come home empty-handed. Yesterday, we found out why Donald Trump wanted this guy to be prime minister so badly. It's because Trump knew he would get everything he wanted with this prime minister. In addition to keeping all the Trudeau-era policies that are already chasing away jobs and investments, this prime minister decided to offer a $1 trillion gift of Canadian investment dollars flowing to the U.S. That means mines built in the U.S., factories built in the U.S., sawmills built in the U.S., all with Canadian investment dollars. So simple question, in exchange for this generous sacrifice, did the Prime Minister get an end to all U.S. tariffs once and for all?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
We will take no lesson from the Conservatives. No lessons from the Conservatives. On this side of the aisle, and all Canadians, we believe in this country, Mr. Speaker. Canada is the place where we attract talent. Canada is the place where we build ships, we build cars, we build planes. Canada is the place where we have critical minerals. Canada is the place where we have energy. Canada is the only country in the G7 with a free trade with all other G7 nations, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build Canada strong. We are the true north, strong and free, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Believe in Canada? This Liberal Prime Minister won't even pay taxes in Canada, Mr. Speaker. Once those investment dollars go to the U.S., they don't come back. Just look at TC Energy. That used to be called TransCanada Energy until they had to drop the word Canada because they can't get anything built in this country. They just put $8.5 billion to work in the U.S. The Prime Minister said during the election, anyone who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him. Yesterday, he knelt there like a pylon while the President skated all around him. Did he get an end to U.S. tariffs in return?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I have even more good news for the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. On November 4th, we will be presenting a budget with generational investment, Mr. Speaker, that is going to make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. We will invest in our people. We're going to build this country. We're going to empower Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build Canada strong, and we're going to do it with all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Oxford.
Speaker, the Liberal Prime Minister promised to fight for our workers, but under his watch, Canada has lost over 86,000 jobs. We have the fastest shrinking economy and the second highest unemployment rate in the G7. The Liberal decision to buy American to appease Trump has cost Cami over 900 jobs in my riding. The Liberal Prime Minister continues to sell out our workers. He's handing over their jobs to the United States and is driving $1 trillion of investment down south. Why?
Yeah!
The honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Listen, Mr. Speaker, over a decade, Canadians...
I'm trying to listen. I'm trying. The honourable Minister. Didn't you fire your...
For decades, Mr. Speaker, Canadians have watched as Conservatives have fought against their interests. Not just voted against their interests, Mr. Speaker, but actively worked to fight against their families' prosperity. Whether it's beating back unionization, whether it's voting against school nutrition programs, whether it's fighting against Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know who has their back, and it sure isn't the Conservative Party.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable-Lotbinière. The Liberals don't want to talk about the $1 trillion of investment. That is the amount that the Prime Minister promised President Trump. over the next 5 years. What did the Prime Minister get in return for this promise? A free lunch at the White House. That's it, Mr. Speaker. That's the only result. Our workers are losing their jobs because businesses will be moving to the United States. Mills and sawmills will be closing their doors in Canada and reopening down south. Is that what the Prime Minister promised to Canadians? A lunch at the White House? The Honourable Minister of Trade. Another little lesson for the Conservatives. We have investors in Canada that invest all over the world. For example, the Caisse de dépôt et de placement. The proceeds come back to Canada, where they are given over to our nurses and doctors and firefighters. Everyone benefits. Canadian investment abroad is a good thing for Canada. It is a tool that we can use to build Canada strong. And that is exactly what we are doing with our workers. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable-Lotbinière. What we want, Mr. Speaker, is a country where people invest here, where people around the world invest here in Canada. Instead of doing what the Liberals do and forking over $1 trillion to the United States over the next 5 years, that will cost jobs. The Prime Minister came back empty-handed. It's not just me saying that. Newspapers all over the country, from coast to coast to coast, are in agreement. A lot of words and little results when the Prime Minister goes to meet President Trump. Why is the Prime Minister selling out our future to the United States instead of keeping his promise to end the tariffs? The Honourable Government House Leader. Wow, it looks like there's a Conservative quoting Radio-Canada. That's new. They wanted to abolish Radio-Canada during the last campaign. Pension funds and people around the world are investing in Canada. The world is investing in Canada. We are one of the best countries in the G7 for direct foreign investment. And then, thanks to us, we will be building projects that people can invest in. Ports and major projects built with Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, built by Canadian trades workers. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, 5 premiers, including the Premier of Quebec, wrote to the Prime Minister with a clear request that he should withdraw the federal government's factum in the Supreme Court challenge of Bill 21. These 5 premiers refused to let Ottawa use the courts as a weapon in its fight against the notwithstanding clause. I will quote the 5 premiers. The federal government's arguments represent a complete disavowal of the constitutional bargain that brought the Charter into being. Will the Liberals end their constitutional power play and withdraw their factum? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals did not begin this court challenge, but we will participate in a case that is now being studied by the Supreme Court. It is very important that the federal government protect the Charter and the rights of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, after a few years, this case has reached the Supreme Court. It would be unthinkable for the federal government not to weigh in. We will take part in this court case, and we will protect our Charter today and into the future. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, this morning, when he was questioned about the federal government's attack on Bill 21 and the notwithstanding clause, the Minister of Justice went rogue once more. He defended his crusade by stating that democracy is under pressure around the world. And as an example, he cited the war in Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. So I guess for him, Quebec's use of the notwithstanding clause to protect state secularism is a risk to democracy comparable to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Honestly, will the minister immediately withdraw that ridiculous and insulting analogy? The Honourable Minister of Justice.
When a member chooses to misinterpret a quote for his political position, it's clear he believes his own argument is very weak. The positions that we have advanced in the Supreme Court of Canada are that the notwithstanding clause does not allow governments, federal or provincial, to permanently damage the rights of Canadians, and that it does not permit governments to silence the courts when governments violate the rights of Canadians. The provinces may have a different point of view. I invite them to participate in the court proceedings. That is a healthy way in a democracy to challenge ideas you may not like.
The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
This Prime Minister's broken promises are hurting Canadians. He promised he was going to spend less, and in fact, he's going to spend more, a lot more. Trudeau left a deficit of $42 billion. This Prime Minister is going to supersize it well past $60 billion. Deficits cause inflation, but it's Canadians who end up paying the price. In fact, 86,000 Canadians have paid that price by losing their jobs. When will this Prime Minister stop his reckless spending?
When? The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, you can't make this up. This coming from a leader who's never had a job outside of this House and who couldn't even negotiate with the members of Carleton to keep his seat. The world has changed, and we're going to change how we budget, Mr. Speaker. On November 4th, we're going to come forth with a disciplined budget that's going to build. We're going to build. We're going to invest in Canada. I ask the leader opposite to negotiate his way to finding a way to support us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
That's just an incredible example of 35 seconds of saying absolutely nothing. What is actually going on here is we've got fancy bankers speak to try and say that debt is investment. Debt is debt. It doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on this pig. And it's Canadians who pay the price of this reckless debt spending. Canada has the second highest unemployment in the G7. 86,000 Canadians just lost their job. And all this guy can do is think it's time to sell jokes at Yuck Yucks. When will this Prime Minister realize his reckless spending is actually hurting Canadians?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know where the member opposite's been, but for the last 4 months, we've been crossing the country, listening to Canadians, getting feedback from Canadians. Mr. Speaker, on November 4th, we will table a disciplined budget that will spend less and invest more in Canada. We will build Canada's economy. We will become the strongest, most resilient economy in the G7. I ask the Conservative Party to cut the rhetoric, get on board. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
The Prime Minister has broken his promise to Canadians. He promised the strongest economy in the G7, but instead delivered the fastest shrinking economy and the second highest unemployment rate. 86,000 more Canadians have lost their jobs, and a staggering $52 billion of net investment has fled the country. And what's the Prime Minister's solution? Send a further $1 trillion of investment down to the U.S. Why is the Prime Minister acting like an investment agent for Trump instead of keeping his promises to Canadians to deliver jobs?
Well done. The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader's been busy writing letters. We're busy cutting taxes. We've cut taxes for 22 million Canadians. We've cut the GST for first-time homebuyers. Interest rates are dropped. And, Mr. Speaker, we are going to build homes at a pace not seen since the Second World War. I ask the party opposite to get on board, stop fighting our initiatives, and support us. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
10 years to deliver all that, and they've delivered nothing. Now, this Prime Minister's promised fiscal discipline, but instead is playing fiscal shell game with his to hide his failures. He's broken his promise to deliver a declining debt-to-GDP ratio and has abandoned fiscal guardrails. The accounting sleight of hand they're offering cannot hide the truth. A deficit of well over $60 billion. Canadians know that debt is debt and deficits drive inflation. How much higher is inflation going to go because of the Liberals' broken promises to rein in their out-of-control spending and deficits?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, we consider elections job interviews. Canadians looked at the resume of our leader and the leader of the opposition. It wasn't even close. Our leader has world-class business and economic experience versus the leader of the opposition has none. On November 4th, Mr. Speaker, we will table a disciplined budget. We will spend less, invest more in nation-building projects, in defense and infrastructure, and we will build houses at a scale not seen since the Second World War. Mr. Speaker, we're tired of the rhetoric. Join us. Let's build Canada.
L'honorable député de Côte.
The honourable member for Côte-Sud, Rivière-du-Loup, Kataskamik-Témiscouata. Mr. Speaker, since we've had these Liberal Prime Minister's expenses have skyrocketed, consultants' fees have gone from $19 to $26 billion. Despite the promises of this Liberal government, the deficit has gone from $42 to $62 billion. And the result is more inflation, fewer jobs, and a declining economy. It's not surprising that people in my riding are not able to make ends meet. Does this government realize that their broken promises are costing Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, what we've done since we came to power is that we've lowered taxes for 22 million Canadians in order to improve middle-class purchasing power in Canada. We passed legislation to unite the Canadian economy. $250 billion contribution to GDP. It's not surprising that Canadians and Quebecers have chosen a serious leader with a serious and ambitious plan. The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, this week the Minister of Finance announced a new budget framework which will separate regular operating expenses and capital investment. In addition, this new plan will change the budget cycle. Budgets will be tabled in the fall, and economic updates will be published in the spring. So in my riding, people are looking forward to the budget, and they want to know very concretely how this new budget framework will not only improve planning, but also improve the implementation of government policy. The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for this excellent question. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the world is changing and we also need to adapt. We need to spend less and invest more. That's why earlier this week, I presented a new way of doing things, a new framework that will improve how we use capital, and that will also change the budget cycle. That will offer opposition members more clarity on public accounts. It will also offer more clarity to businesses and organizations who receive federal funds. It will help them plan. It will also help to plan for construction season. Everyone will win with this new plan. Thank you.
Speaker, one day after the Prime Minister's visit to the White House, the U.S. Commerce Secretary has announced that there will be no relief on tariffs for finished automobiles in Canada. This after 700 Oshawa GM workers lost their jobs and GM sent $4 billion to the U.S.
I apologize for interrupting the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, but apparently the interpretation is not working, so I'll allow them. Is it back on? C'est bon? It's good? So from the top, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition from the top.
One day after the Prime Minister met at the White House, promising that he would fight for Canadian workers, we learned from the U.S. Commerce Secretary that there will be no relief for Canadian finished automobiles. This after 700 Oshawa GM workers lost their jobs with $4 billion of GM money going to the U.S. 900 CAMI workers in Ingersoll losing their jobs with those jobs going to the U.S. and 150 workers at Stellantis being sent home while $8 billion of Stellantis money goes to the U.S. The Prime Minister failed to stand up for auto workers yesterday. Will he do so now?
The Honourable Yeah, okay. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Watch your pressure. He's the Prime Minister. You can call him.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the Prime Minister and the President had a very productive discussion yesterday on steel, on aluminum, on energy for the benefit of the Canadian economy, and on auto. I remind my colleague of the President's words. We want Canada to do well making cars, so we will get there. Mr. Speaker, I encourage the Leader of the Opposition to take a look at even Ford Canada in my riding of Oakville and to realize that on this side of the House we are building.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister refused to stand up for our auto workers, and today he refuses to stand up for our auto workers. How can he sit right there? Well, the U.S. Commerce Secretary just came out and said the 25% tariffs will stay in place. Despite the Prime Minister's concession after concession, he backed down on counter tariffs, backed down on the DST. Yesterday offered $1 trillion of Canadian investment money, and still he can't win anything from our auto workers. What does he say to those thousands of auto workers that are out of work because of his weakness?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we have at this point with the United States for the auto sector is the lowest tariff in the world, less than 10%, lower than Europe, lower than Korea, lower than Japan. We have the lowest tariff, and we are still negotiating because, as the President said yesterday, the Prime Minister of Canada is a tough negotiator. We will get a great deal.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, give me $1 trillion and even I will say something nice about this guy. Oh my God. How much is it going to cost to pay Canadian investment dollars to flatter this Prime Minister's ego? Yep. It would make you laugh if it didn't make you cry, Mr. Speaker. But for the workers in Ingersoll, in Windsor, and in Oshawa who have lost their jobs after the Prime Minister promised to protect them, how will they ever trust this Prime Minister again after he betrayed them?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Just a moment. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, one thing that Canadians know from Ingersoll to Windsor to Oakville to Oshawa is that on this side of the House, we will not let Canadians down. We have the strategic fund putting billions of dollars to support auto workers and the auto sector. We are supporting the agri-food business, and we will always be there for Canadian workers as well, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we're about diversifying supply chains and supporting Canadians while we get the best deal possible for this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's really pathetic that the Prime Minister will not stand up for auto workers in this House of Commons, just like he refused to stand up for them yesterday. We have thousands of auto workers who have lost their jobs since this Prime Minister promised to protect them. These families are sitting around their tables wondering what is going to happen to them. They are among the 86,000 Canadians who've lost their jobs, leading to the second highest unemployment of any country in the G7. We have record lineups at food banks, and this Prime Minister is giving away $1 trillion investment dollars to the U.S. while people here can't even pay their bills. Why won't he stand up now?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives on standing up for Canadian businesses and Canadian workers. Every
opposition.
I think we're beginning to see how it is that the president has been able to bulldoze over this prime minister. He won't even stand up when he is confronted by the Americans. Just over an hour ago, a report came out that the U.S. Commerce Secretary said there will be no relief for Canadian-made automobiles going into the United States. The Prime Minister is back down on counter tariffs, back down on the DST, back down on defense. Yesterday promised to push $1 trillion of private sector investment out of our country. How is he going to look those Canadian auto workers in the eye and tell them how he got nothing for them in return?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is a sad day in this House when the Leader of the Opposition suggests that standing up for the defense of this country, when the Leader of the Opposition suggests that spending to defend our borders, that spending to defend our fulfillment in NATO, that is backing down on defense. Shame. Now, we have the lowest tariff on autos of...
Speaker, come on, we can't even hear anything.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, at least he finally got up, but he didn't address the question about auto workers. There are auto workers who are sitting at home right now who do not know how they're going to pay their mortgages. This Prime Minister looked them in the eye and said he was going to protect their jobs. And then he said he would put his elbows up. And then he said he would get a win by July 21st. Then he said that he would have a deal. There's been no deal. There's been no win, and now for these workers, there is no job. Today we learned that he's backing down again on auto tariffs. Why is it that he's selling out our auto workers at a time when they need him most?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Come on, Mr. Speaker, listen to this.
Japan, the European Union, the United Kingdom, every other country in the world is paying a higher tariff than Canada has gotten on automobiles. And we are not done. That is why we have not signed an accord on autos. That is why we are fighting hard for our auto workers. And I put the President on notice yesterday about the consequences of not having that accord.
Okay. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. President, you have been warned. If you put in another tariff, he's going to give you yet another $1 trillion. This is the tough negotiator that we hired? The guy who broke his promise to have a deal on July 21st. A guy who broke his promise to negotiate a win, who simultaneously removed the counter tariffs while he was giving speeches promising to have them in place, and yesterday offered more concessions to the U.S. president, knowing that the tariffs that are killing our auto sector would stay in place. Why does he always back down and give our jobs to the Americans instead of standing up for Canada?
I just want to make sure we're ready before we go to the... The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and I think it's important for the entire House to understand that we have a strategy with the United States. That means that our auto sector is paying less than 10% tariff. When Japan, when Europe, when the UK, when the rest of the world is paying 15, which is bigger than 10 or higher. And we are not done yet, because we refuse to sign a deal that isn't better in the interests of Canadians. And that's why
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he is already signing a deal that makes us worse off because he makes concession after concession after concession while getting nothing in return. Yesterday, he announced that his policies will drive $1 trillion of private sector money out of our country as part of the agreement that he is going to sign with the United States. That means factories and plants closing in Canada. Most of all in our auto sector, which is on the verge of being wiped out after he promised to save it. So can he tell me, did he demand the president lift all tariffs on Canadian autos, yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our agreement yesterday, the President and myself, is to focus now on steel, on aluminum, on energy, the building blocks of our broader competitiveness, including our auto sector. Those negotiations on autos continue from a position that is the strongest in the world. 10 is less than 15, which is less than 25, which is less than 50.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Zero is the paycheck that those workers who've lost their jobs are getting right now. And Mr. Speaker, 7th is last place in the G7 when it comes to growth, or in this case, negative growth. This Prime Minister has to get his excuses straight. He blames the tariffs for the fact that we have the second highest unemployment in the G7 and the fastest shrinking economy. And then he claims at the same time that the tariffs are really not so bad. So which is it? Why is our economy so weak? Because of his diplomatic failings abroad or his disastrous economic policies at home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've been saying all this year, long before the Leader of the Opposition caught up, the U.S. has fundamentally changed its trading policy with everyone. It is a rupture. In that environment, Canada has the best deal. But what we are doing is controlling what we can control, which is building Canada strong. November 4th, that side of the House is going to have a chance of whether they're going to build alongside Canadians a generational investment in an ambitious future for us.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, hate crimes are not like other crime. They seek to divide us, sow fear, and rip apart our communities. Too often, these unacceptable actions.
Take it from the top. I couldn't hear. There's some noise in the corners here. So if the honourable member could start over.
Hate crimes are not like other crime. They seek to divide us, to sow fear, and to rip our communities apart. Too often, these unacceptable actions are ignored or underreported. Can the Minister of Justice explain how creating a specific hate crime offense will enable us to better recognize and punish these attacks?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Hamilton Mountain for her hard work on this file. Hate crimes don't only affect one person, they affect the whole community. With this bill, we will create a specific offense for hate crime. Once we have tailored legislation, we will be better able to punish those responsible and protect our communities. Hate does not belong in Canada, and Canadians need to feel safe from it. I sincerely hope that all parties in the House will support this bill.
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Prime Minister promised to create jobs in Canada, but since he became Prime Minister, we've lost 86,000 jobs. Promise broken. He promised to increase investment in Canada, but since he became Prime Minister, we lost $54 billion of investment to the United States. Promise broken. Yesterday, we all watched in shock as he promised another $1 trillion of Canadian investment money to the United States. I hope it is not the case that he plans to keep his promise to Donald Trump after breaking his promises to Canadians. How many jobs will it cost us if he does?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that member is new to this chamber, so maybe he doesn't know the record of the party that he sits with. But they've voted consistently against the interests of Canadians. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, but they've fought against Canadians' rights, whether it's labor rights, Mr. Speaker, whether it's the right to retire at a decent age, Mr. Speaker, whether it's the right to raise our children with the resources that we need, Mr. Speaker. These Conservatives have voted against Canadians, and that's why Canadians don't trust them, Mr. Speaker. On this side, they trust the Prime Minister to get this job done.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, on the other hand, this minister is not a new member, and so she should know her own record. 86,000 job losses under this Prime Minister alone. Canada has the worst youth employment rate in over 25 years. Job numbers come out again this Friday, and the situation continues to get grimmer. Witnesses at our parliamentary public hearings on youth unemployment were very clear yesterday. It isn't a wealth distribution problem, it's a wealth creation problem. And the Prime Minister wants to send another $1 trillion to the United States. Why is he breaking his promises and continuing to ship jobs south of the border?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, well, youth would be disappointed to know that that member voted against their interests time and time and time again. Whether it was for skills training, Mr. Speaker, whether it was for Canada Summer Jobs, Mr. Speaker, whether it was in investments in research and innovation, Mr. Speaker, I sure hope that the nature of that question means he'll vote for this budget, Mr. Speaker, because we're going to invest in Canadians, and Canadians know that.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How can the Liberals clap today? The Prime Minister admitted that this is a sad day. Let's look at all of these broken promises. The Prime Minister promised to create jobs, but what happened was that we lost 86,000, a failure. He promised to grow the economy, but instead we have the second highest unemployment rate in the G7, another failure. He promised to increase Canadian investment and protect our jobs, but the result is that we've lost $54 billion investment dollars that have fled Canada. When will the Prime Minister finally keep his promises? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of good news to share. My colleague must realize that this government, the very first thing we did, Mr. Speaker, is bring in a measure to help 22 million Canadians. I'm sure that in his own writing, my colleague told everyone, thanks to the Liberal government, 22 million Canadians won't have to pay as much in taxes. And on November 4th, we will announce a generational investment. Even more good news. Starting on November 4th, we will build a strong, prosperous country, a strong Canada together. The Honourable Member for Quebec Centre. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, there was a meeting of the leaders of the G7, and Canada clearly stated that it would be a leader in the world race to extract critical minerals, which are important for creating electric vehicles, clean technology, and for information technologies. Controlling these critical minerals will enable us to create good middle-class jobs. It will enable us to protect our economy. Can the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources tell us how the Canadian government will be strengthening our leadership on critical minerals for Quebecers and all Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for that question. Our government's commitment to make Canada a leader in critical minerals is being put into action. This weekend, I was in beautiful Saguenay, where we announced that Ariane Phosphate has been approved for a $735,000 NRCan research grant. By investing in resilient and sustainable Canadian critical minerals and mineral processing, We are putting Canadians to work, securing Canadian sovereignty, and seizing an opportunity to make Canada a clean and conventional energy superpower.
The honourable member for Long Range Mountains.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' $742 million gun grab continues to be mired in controversy after the minister admitted on leaked audio that it will not work. In Cape Breton, residents are angered by the program being launched, and the local police union was left in the dark and not consulted. Now we find out that the Liberal minister is the brother-in-law of the police chief overseeing the program. Will the Liberals now admit that the only way they can get police forces to participate is to hire their family?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Speaker, let me just remind the party opposite that the Mass Casualty Commission in Nova Scotia recommended that governments take decisive action to take assault-style firearms off our streets, Mr. Speaker. It is a critical part of the work in ensuring the safety and security of our communities. I want to thank the people of Cape Breton for the pilot program, Mr. Speaker. I know the police chief as well as men and women in uniform are very much engaged in this process. The pilot is working, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to reporting back to the House on its progress, and I also look forward to the expansion of the program nationwide.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend, eminent Arctic expert at Professor Franklin Griffiths wrote that Canada needs to, quote, Canada needs to consider the possibility that the U.S. President will, without our permission, send American warships through the Northwest Passage as a show of force. He asked a very pertinent question, what will Canada do? And asked whether the Prime Minister would be prepared to start by thanking the Inuit people of Nunavut for protecting Canadian sovereignty through the assertion of Inuit ownership of those lands. Will the Prime Minister respond to that brilliant suggestion?
The Honourable Minister of Northern and Arctic Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, our new government is strengthening Arctic security by investing in people, infrastructure, and partnerships that protect Canada's sovereignty and support resilient communities. We're working with Indigenous governments and territorial partners to ensure Canada's presence in the North is secure, visible, and enduring. That means investments in dual-use infrastructure like ports, airstrips, bridges, and clean energy. That reinforces defense priorities and lasting benefits to communities in the North.
Alors, ça met fin à la